In last week's video, we took a hard look at the effect that relative wages, taxes, and contributions to things like healthcare, retirement, education, and childcare can all have on both single workers and families in the United States and Germany. But in today's video, we're going to be taking it one step further, taking into account cost of living factors such as housing, utilities, food, and transportation, to ultimately try to answer the question, who has more money at the end of the day? One of the big factors that influence workers around the globe is the calculation of how far your salary will go to maintain your standard of living. And if you're someone who's interested in living abroad or just someone who's curious about the bang for your buck, cost of living comparisons can not only be a helpful way of really understanding your purchasing power, but also a helpful tool for figuring out where exactly around the globe you plan to live. And although things like relative wages, income taxes, and social contributions that pay for things like healthcare, education, childcare, your pension or social security, and unemployment insurances do play a huge role in that decision, it's not the full picture. So as many of you asked in the comment section of last week's video, what do things look like for our single workers and for our more established workers with families when we look at the cost of living? Who really has more disposable income in the US versus Germany? And ultimately, what can that afford you? So let's get started. All right, guys, so if you didn't happen to catch last week's video, I highly suggest that you check it out because it'll give you all of the base values and also a basic understanding on how I arrived at the numbers we're going to be working with today. You'll also see how workers within the same profession can command different salaries between the US and Germany. And you'll also be able to see a detailed breakdown of marginal versus effective tax rates for our workers, the effects of exchange rates between the euro and the US dollar, as well as ceiling contribution caps on regressive taxes and contributions like Social Security and pensions. Yeah, just go watch it first. But I do want to just briefly show those numbers one more time because this video essentially picks up where that one left off. Our single worker in the US is a 23-year-old man named Steve. After accounting for taxes, FICA, Social Security, a small savings, health insurance, and some small student loan payments, and long-term care insurance, Steve left last week's analysis with $58,599 in disposable income, or $4,883.25 per month. Our single worker in Germany is also a 23-year-old man who's named Max. He has the same occupation, professional experience, and personal dynamics. However, living in Germany, he does have different relative earnings and contributes to various social contributions, which all affect his take-home pay. At the end of last week's video, Max had 40,831 euros in disposable income each year, or 3,402 euros and 58 cents per month. But I didn't just want to analyze single workers in the US and Germany, because as you age, both your personal and professional dynamics can change, and that can have big impacts on your personal and financial responsibilities. We found that Steve and Stephanie's family had $101,508 in disposable income each year, or $8,458.92 per month. And Max and Mila had 96,059 euros in disposable yearly income, or 8,004 euros and 92 cents per month. In short, whereas we saw a greater earning difference between our single workers between the US and Germany, for our families it was actually pretty close, with the German family actually coming out around $1,000 ahead after we took all of those different factors into play. So moving forward in this video, I'm going to start with those numbers for take-home pay, but begin to add in all of those various cost of living factors that they could potentially see in their living scenarios. So let's start doing some math. Now, the first item that we need to account for is shelter. But there are a lot of variables that can dramatically affect how much you pay for housing at the end of the day. I mean, even if we weren't doing an international comparison here, what city do I place our theoretical workers in for an even comparison? And should my workers rent? Who should buy? What kind of neighborhood do I place them in? And how much should I have them spend each month to make it affordable? Yeah, you get my point here. And the thing is, at the end of the day, on average, rents do happen to be lower in Germany than the United States. But on the flip side of things, buildable land and single-family home prices tend to be lower in the US than here in Germany. Germans and Americans both still spend around the same percentage, plus or minus 30% of their net income on housing. So since it's almost impossible to do an apples-to-apples comparison here on housing specifically, what I'd rather do in this section is show the relative affordability with these wages. In other words, I want to know, how far would your income take you if you wanted to purchase something in the US and Germany, and what would that actually look like? So let's start off in the United States with Steve. In the first video, I mentioned that Steve lives in Denver, Colorado. But because Steve is single and fresh out of university, it's a bit of a stretch to presume that the average person would have accumulated enough wealth at his age to purchase a home. So he's going to rent for this calculation. Looking at Denver, Colorado, the price for a one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment fluctuates greatly depending on the neighborhood and the amenities that you're looking for in that apartment. Now, there are various models and financial planning tools out there that give differing perspectives on affordability. It's not a one-size-fits-all plan, but for simplicity's sake, and because it's also used by the National Housing Guidelines as a standard of rental housing affordability, I'm going to follow the 30% rule for Steve, which here means that Steve will pay 30% of his net income on rent and renter's insurance. So with a monthly net income of $4,883.25, 30% is equivalent to $1,464.98. And with the budget in mind, I was actually able to find him this apartment in downtown Denver. As you can see from the photos, this kind of budget goes pretty far considering the prime location. It comes with an open kitchen, nice, easy to clean plank wood flooring, and an updated interior with shaker-style cabinets, quartz countertops, and stainless steel appliances. There's also a fitness center and a pool, as well as hookups in your apartment for your own laundry. Rent is $1,305. Parking in a covered garage is an additional $95, and renter's insurance comes in at $11. In total, Steve spent $1,411. Now on to Germany. Much like the US, rent prices vary greatly depending on where you live. But for balance, let's assume the same 30% rule for Max, and let's place him in Berlin, because that's also where I happen to have him in the last video. We're just gonna keep it simple. So with a monthly take-home pay of €3,402.58, that would give him a rental budget of about $1,020. For my German audience, this phrase is common, but for Americans, I'll explain that this budget is going to be for his cold rent, which is not inclusive of Nebenkosten. Often, older buildings will share the costs for maintenance, water, and sometimes gas. But I'm going to add these prices into the utility section later on in this video. And although Berlin is not the most expensive city to live in Germany, at his price, you're either going to have to compromise between location and size. You're definitely not going to find something new and large in the city center. For Max, I chose this apartment in the Berlin district of Marzahn-Hellersdorf on the eastern city limits. While it's a commute into the city, it's only a 3-minute walk to the nearest S-Bahn station where he can get all the way to the Alexanderplatz in just 25 minutes. And since he gave up on location, he can rent this apartment for €970 a month, which includes a kitchen, separate bedroom, and renovated finishes, as well as a balcony. A parking space is available for an additional fee, although it's not listed online, but it's important to underscore that a car is not really as essential in European urban living like it is in the United States. Not only is Berlin very well connected with trains, trams, subways, and a robust cycling infrastructure, but communities are purposefully built to be walkable. Hausratsversicherung, which is the closest equivalent to renter's insurance as it protects personal belongings, his yearly premium would only be between 50 and 150 euros a year. So I'll aim for the middle at about 100 euros per year, or just 8 euros a month. In total, he spent 978 euros in this category. Now let's transition to our families. In the United States in 2022, nearly 2/3 of Americans owned a home. So it's a pretty safe assumption that Steve and Stephanie own their home. And with a combined net income at the end of last week's video of $8,458.92 per month, they would have a budget of just over $2,500 to spend on housing, working again with a 30% budgeting rule. And as someone who has spent their academic career researching the housing industry in the United States, you can imagine that we've built up a pretty robust library on this subject on our YouTube channel. So I'm going to go ahead and link those videos down in the description of this video if you would like to learn more, because quite frankly, we've got a lot to cover. And if you'd like a more critical dissection of the housing industry, you're probably better off watching those videos anyway. But because property taxes in the US directly affect community resources in your immediate area, and because Steve and Stephanie have 2 kids, I'm gonna move them out to the Denver suburbs to find a larger home in a good school district. With their budget and with a 30-year mortgage on current interest rates of 4.5%, we can conservatively say that they could afford a home with a purchase price of around $475,000. For reference, affordability was calculated using the Chase Mortgage Affordability Calculator with their joint income and accounting for all costs in video 1. This would buy them a home that looks a lot like this in Aurora, Colorado. Built in 2014, this 1,365 square foot, 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom home has a large backyard and pretty updated interiors. The mortgage payment is estimated at $2,144. Homeowners insurance, another $166. Property taxes are yearly for 2022 at $3,892, coming down to $324.33 per month. In addition, they'll also need to pay an HOA fee of $33.75. In total, this cost them $2,668.08. But let's move on to Germany. Now, whether Max or Mila rent or buy isn't as straightforward. Germany has the second lowest share of homeowners of all OECD countries, and this is mostly driven by housing policies that produce incentives to rent. But because we're looking at relatively high income earners here, and we want to keep this analysis comparable to the US, I'll have them buy. And as someone who recently purchased a home in Germany, who also used to own a home in the United States, I can tell you from firsthand experience that the process is very different between the 2 countries. And again, we have an entire video as well as blog posts actually dedicated to this very subject. So if you'd like to learn more, again, the links are gonna be down in the description of this video. But in short, I think one of the things I just really wanna touch on very briefly here is that while Steve and Stephanie would probably have had to have put down maybe $50,000 in a down payment, as well as maybe splitting the closing costs with the seller, those upfront purchasing costs when you buy a house here in Germany can be very different. For example, in Germany, you could anticipate other costs, such as a requirement for 10% equity, or paying a real estate broker fee that can be anywhere from 3.5% to 7% plus VAT of the purchase price. There's also real estate transfer tax and stamp duty, which is 3.5% to 6.5%, depending on which German state you're buying in. And finally, there's the notary fee, and this is 2% of the purchase price. It'll cover things like the contract, the negotiation, and the signing ceremony and entry into the land register. But in total, these things can cost you anywhere from 19 to 25.5% of the total cost. But because these are upfront costs and not monthly costs, and we didn't really calculate that in for Steve or Stephanie either, I really just want to focus in here on what you could afford as a percentage of your net income each month, so we're going to put those things aside. So keeping the same 30% income over a 30-year loan with a 3.1% interest rate from the Deutsche Bundesbank, this would ultimately mean that Max and Mila could afford a house of around 478,000 euros. So with a take-home pay of 8,004 euros and 92 cents, they could afford housing costs of just over 2,400 euros a month, which would purchase them an apartment to own like this one. We also had to move out of the suburbs, in this case to Potsdam-Bilic, with 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms over 130 square meters. It's actually almost identical in size to our American single-family home. It has been recently renovated and includes 1 outdoor reserved parking space. The mortgage for this apartment, estimated by HypoFriend, is 2,218 euros, and Grundsteuer is only about 12 euros. Now, very briefly, property taxes, called Grundsteuer in German, as you can just see by that low number, are vastly different from the United States, and they're paid locally and determined by the state in which the property is located. The rate is based on the assessed value of the property and, again, is usually quite low and varies between 0.26% and 1%. But this rate is based on the fiscal value of the property, which is typically below the property's market value. This number is then multiplied by a location coefficient. The resulting number is then subject to another coefficient depending on the state. But honestly, the result from all this mind-bending number crunching is, again, thankfully low. A standard apartment in Berlin can expect to pay only 80 to 150 euros per year in property tax, according to a Berlin real estate brokerage firm. So because this is a large apartment, I put this property tax for Max and Mila on the higher end of that spectrum. But still, like I said, the amount that they pay in property tax each month is comically low compared to what Steve and Stephanie are going to be paying in Aurora, Colorado. But again, this is largely due to the fact that Max and Mila have paid a ton of taxes up front just to buy the property. So what does all of this mean at the end of the day? For one, I think most would agree with me that the properties in the States were nicer. Although interestingly, not necessarily larger in terms of interior square footage. The US family saw a much larger property with a backyard, but the interior of the home was pretty on par with the flat that we saw outside of Berlin. I would imagine, though, that many of the American viewers of this video would probably never consider living above a bank with their family, but multi-use buildings are very much the norm here in Europe. Plus, it's important to understand that ultimately, these are very different communities when you look at these two properties from a bird's eye view. Our American house is the poster child of suburbia, where all of the houses, streets, and landscaping practically looks the same. There is a community pool nearby, which is great for kids, and a school that's less than 2 miles away. But those kids wouldn't likely be biking or walking anywhere outside of that neighborhood since they'd have to cross a county road. And the nearest grocery store is 8.8 miles or 14 kilometers away. So you're pretty much car dependent. On the flip side of things, the German home is located in a community that looks like this. Bakeries, grocery stores, local butchers, and flower shops are all within a 3-minute walk. And the home is only a 5-minute walk to the train station with direct access to Berlin.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this video today that we're making about cost of living between the United States and Germany. Now that I'm closing on the 10-year mark of living here in Germany, I've been taking a little bit of time to reflect on my language progression and how it's shaped me today. One of the first little ones I had when I first came here was when I got invited to go out to the bars with my German colleagues for a night in Freiburg. When they would switch from English to German, I could actually follow along with the conversation. It really made a huge difference in making lifelong friendships and feeling more at home here in Germany. And speaking of home, fast forward to just last year when Ashton and I purchased our first home in Germany. We actually held the entire notary appointment, going over the real estate contracts and loan documents 100% in German. It was intense, but I look back today on the accomplishment I felt this was for my language learning. Language wins don't just stop after the first one. With the help I've received from Lingoda, there's really no limit to what you can achieve. If you haven't heard about them before, Lingoda is an online language school that connects students across the world with native level teachers in live classes to learn a language. Currently, they offer classes to learn English, business English, Spanish, French, or German. Lingoda hosts one-on-one or group learning sessions on Zoom for a range of abilities from beginners to advanced. Classes are available 24/7 and offer a highly immersive and flexible learning experience. So Ashton and I can fit in a class early in the morning before Jack wakes up, usually 5 a.m., or late in the evening after he goes to bed. And we've been able to complete German classes on trains, in airports, and in other countries that we travel as a family. So if you really want to jumpstart your language learning, you really need to look at the Lingoda Language Sprint. This is an intensive language challenge which can take either 15 classes or 30 classes a month for 2 months. But here's the best part. If you attend all the classes, you can get 50 or 100% cash back. But because you watch and enjoy our videos, we have an exclusive offer for you. Use the code WINWITHJONATHAN or click the link down in the description of this video to get 20 euros or $25 off the deposit. So why not join me? Learning a language is all about ambition, progression, and success. And you can feel confident that Lingoda has the expertise for you to reach those winning moments. All right, now back to the video.
Next up is utilities. And obviously this is a cost of living factor that has been in the forefront of our news for the last year. The current average rate per kilowatt hour in the United States as of November 2022 is just over 16 cents, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. In contrast, energy prices here in our city, just outside of Freiburg, is 48.24 cents per kilowatt hour, literally 3 times the cost. However, there's some folly in looking at these energy prices during an energy crisis and assuming that these prices are going to stay for forever. The federal government plans to cap energy prices from January at 40 cents per kilowatt hour for 80% of a household or small firms' consumption. Mid-size and large companies will have their prices capped at 13 cents per kilowatt hour for 70% of their energy consumption. And gas prices will also be capped from March 1st, with the possibility that they too will be backdated. But even before the energy crisis, we did in fact see higher energy prices than compared to the United States. And of course, we've actually made a couple of videos on this, so I'm gonna go ahead and link those down in the description if you would like to learn more. But let's take a look at utilities and maintenance costs for our American and German workers. Starting with Steve, it's indicated in the listing that Steve's apartment is fully electric, and the local provider for Denver is Xcel Energy. On their website, their residential rate for new customers is 13.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And according to Xcel Energy, the average 1 to 2 bedroom apartment uses 20 to 30 kilowatt hours of electricity per day. That translates to around 900 kilowatt hours per month. So at the aforementioned rate, Steve would be paying an electricity bill of $117.90. Next, water. Individual customer bills vary depending on where the customer lives in the Denver water service area, and of course, how much water they use. However, according to the Denver Water District's website, most residential customers who have a 3/4 inch meter have a fixed monthly charge of $17.20. Steve also pays $250 a year, or $20.83 a month, in what are termed administrative fees, which cover maintenance for the pool, access to the fitness center, landscaping, a dog park, and community laundry, in case he doesn't want to purchase an in-unit washer and dryer, as well as community trash services. So honestly, it just leaves cable and internet, which from Xfinity is $130 a month for a high-speed plan in case he works from home or wants to stream his shows. In total, this will cost him $286.93. For Max, it's indicated in the rental listing that Nebenkosten is 160 euros, and an additional heating costs are 250 euros per month, which is high. For Americans, Nebenkosten is going to be used to cover utilities for shared expenses like entryways, hallways, and basements, as well as sometimes water, in addition to the cleaning of community areas, and maybe even hiring a gardener. But for our American audience, it is also important to understand that Nebenkosten is really a prepayment, and even his heating bill in this case is a prepayment here, which the landlord must quantify at the end of the year to the tenant. After submitting reader meetings to the utility companies, should Max use more in those utilities, he has to pay the difference. But if he uses less in those utilities, he gets the money back at the end of the year. Now, truth be told, most landlords do a pretty good job of estimating these costs. Because, as you can imagine, a landlord doesn't exactly want to float large sums of money until they can settle up with the tenant at the end of the year. So we're going to move forward with the Nebenkosten and the heating costs for Max's apartment as the standard rate that he's going to pay per month. So realistically, the only additional utilities I need to include on top of this is the electricity to run lighting and appliances in his apartment, as well as cable and internet and trash. Electricity for a single person has an estimated consumption rate in Germany of 1,400 kilowatt hours per year, or around 116 per month. And at a rate of 48.24 cents per kilowatt hour, this comes out to 58 euros and 27 cents per month. Trash for his district of Berlin for a 60-liter container picked up every 2 weeks will run him just over 31 euros, and an internet TV package from Telecom around 61 euros a month. This not only includes high-speed streaming, but also a Netflix subscription. And payment to the Rundfunkbeitrag, which covers basic public television and radio, is 18 euros and 36 cents per month. In total, costing him 576 euros and 96 cents. Now for our families. For Steve and Stephanie's home in Aurora, it doesn't give us any information as to whether the home is fully electric or if they use gas utilities. But they don't have a gas range in the kitchen, and other homes that sold in the area were fully electric, so we're just gonna move forward with that assumption. Excel also services Aurora, so if we assume the same residential pricing structure with a home that's approximately 1,400 square feet, the estimated usage for 4 people in a fully electric home is 1,300 kilowatt hours per month, which would give them an electric bill of $170.30 per month. Water and sewer are serviced through the city of Aurora, and you're gonna have to do a bit of math to figure out the base price and then make some guesstimates on the tariff, but because this home doesn't have irrigation, it is pretty conservative to say that they're probably going to be paying around $29 a month for 10,000 gallons of water or less. Trash is collected through waste management and runs them $18.61 per month, and internet and cable is probably going to be about the same plan purchased by Steve, which from Xfinity is $130 a month for a high-speed plan, in case either one of them wants to work from home or stream television shows. In total, this costs them $347.93. And last but not least is our German family. The kilowatt hour usage is lower than for Steve and Stephanie because they don't have an all-electric home, and their power only goes for lighting and appliances, that they're going to use just over 300 kilowatt hours per month. So at the same rate of 48.24 cents per kilowatt hour, it would mean that they spent 148 euros and 57 cents on electricity. For heat, the listing for this property tells us that they have a monthly heating allowance of 365 euros per month. Trash for their district in Billitz for a larger 120-liter container picked up every 2 weeks is 38 euros and 31 cents per month. An internet and TV streaming package from Telecom is going to be that same 61 euros a month because it not only includes high-speed internet, but again, a pretty perky Netflix subscription. And finally, that mandatory payment to the Rundfunkbeitrag, which covers basic public television and radio, will run them 18 euros and 36 cents per month. In total, costing them 631 euros and 19 cents. All right, now next up is transportation. And while I think anybody who has visited Europe is probably pretty aware of the fact that many of our urban environments here have a very robust public transit system network, it's also safe to say that Germans do love their cars and a speedy trip down the Autobahn. But the reality is, Germans still have fewer cars on average than Americans. And this is due in large part because of how well connected our public transportation infrastructure is here in Germany. In most major metropolitan areas, you don't necessarily need a car. And as discussed in the housing section, most communities are purposefully built to be walkable. So let's see the effect that transportation has on our calculations. Starting with Steve in the United States, let's presume he has a car. In the United States, the average used car payment, according to NerdWallet, is $525 for the third quarter of 2022. Tack on car insurance in Colorado, which according to Bankrate.com is $2,019 per year for full coverage in 2022. amounts to $168.25 per month. Gasoline is much cheaper in the US than it is in Germany. And because we don't really know how far his commute is or his driving habits are or what kind of car he's going to have, we're just going to have to ballpark this one. So according to Kelley Blue Book, the average 5-year monthly cost for gasoline for a mid-size car is $129. I think that's a pretty good conservative estimate. So in total, this means that Steve spends $822.25 on transportation costs each month. Now for Max. He's a young guy living in Berlin. So even living on the eastern edge of the city, he still has easy access to U-Bahns and S-Bahns that take him directly into the city. And he's very close to major airports and train stations that are also accessible by public transit. So if we purchase him an unlimited pass for public transit in Berlin, taking him out to the city limits of the B zone, it costs him just 86 euros a month. And if we tack on a car sharing subscription from Mobily, for those times where he feels like he does need a car, it only costs him 15 euros per month plus 6 euros per hour, and any additional kilometers are only 30 cents a kilometer. There's no additional charges for gas or insurance. I'll round this to 40 euros a month here, presuming he might use it a couple weekends a month. In total, this means that Max just pays 126 euros in transportation costs. Now for our families. With Steve and Stephanie, it's a pretty safe assumption that with their professions, they would probably each need a car. And with 2 kids and their income, it's likely they aren't small vehicles either. According to NerdWallet, the average monthly car loan payment in the US is $700 for new vehicles. And again, they're pretty high income earners here, so I don't think it's a stretch to presume that they purchase new cars. And assuming the same average rate for full coverage car insurance in Colorado, according to bankrate.com, at $2,019 per year for full coverage in 2022, that amount for 2 cars comes out to $336.50 a month. And lastly, if we presume that one car is a full-size sedan, the other a mid-size SUV, for balance, the Kelley Blue Book estimate for gasoline costs will be $169 and $176 respectively. Everything together, this totals $2,081.50 per month. For Max and Mila, we did move them out of the city limits in order to be able to afford a home. And while their commuter city is connected to Berlin by train, we should presume that this family has at least one car. Presuming one of them commutes by train, we'll purchase them a Bahn 100 card to cover all Deutsche Bahn costs and all city public transit options. It's pricey at 4,339 euros a year, but that comes out to 361 euros and 58 cents per month. It's cheaper than a car. Let's presume, though, that they did recently purchase a new car, similar to our American family. And as many of you were quick to point out in last week's video, Germans do pay VAT. So I'm going to price out a brand new, top-of-the-line R-Line Tiguan, just to give some costs here. This car retails for 44,780 euros. And with current loan options that don't have a lump sum at the end, if you were just to pay it off evenly, it amounts to 925 euros and 93 cents per month. Car insurance through Allianz for the exact car with comprehensive coverage for a single driver with no accidents was quoted at 1,088 euros per year or 90 euros and 66 cents per month. I'm presuming they drive 20,000 kilometers a year, which is a lot, but they're a family, at the current rate for gasoline, which is hovering around €1.69 per liter, with a car that gets 5.6 liters per 100 kilometers, this is going to cost them, honestly, around 158 euros per month. So in total, their transportation costs are going to be 1,535 euros and 81 cents. Now, for this final section here on food, I'm going to keep it intentionally brief because quite literally just last month, we posted a video comparing grocery store prices between the United States and Germany. And while that video, which by the way, you should check it out, it's linked down in the description here. While that video happened to be based off of personal firsthand experiences of going shopping in Kansas City and Freiburg, Germany, To be honest, our experiences largely line up with grocery prices nationwide. And the ultimate reality is that grocery prices in Germany are much lower than the United States. For single worker Steve, in the US, the average cost of food per month for one person ranges from $150 to $300, depending on your age. However, these national averages vary based on where you live and the quality of food you purchase. But that being said, estimates provided by the USDA suggests that a single man in his 20s has a monthly grocery bill of $265.93. In Germany, Status estimates that for a single man living alone, the average cost for food, beverages, and tobacco is 194 euros per month. For our US family of 4, their estimated expenditures for groceries go up to $903.15 per month. And for Max and Mila, Status estimates that their average spending would be approximately 467 euros per month. All right, so let's take a look at the final outcomes and adjust those numbers based off of today's exchange rate, which is $1 equals 95 cents in euros, or 1 euro equals $1.05 US dollar. For single worker Steve, after taking all cost of living factors we considered today into account, he leaves with $3,508.14 in his pocket. For single worker Max, after we take the same cost of living factors into account, he leaves with 1,527 euros and 62 cents. But let's look at the side-by-side comparison also of our families. For our American family, after all cost of living factors were taken into account, they leave with $2,458.26. But for our German family, after the exact same cost of living factors were taken into account, they leave our analysis with 3,140 euros and 92 cents. Now, obviously, there are many factors that could dramatically change the outcome of this analysis. But generally speaking, if we look back on all of the different factors that I took into consideration for cost of living, so utilities are significantly higher in Germany, but transportation costs are significantly higher in the United States. So for me, I think the big takeaway from this video is twofold. First, for our single workers, the playing field becomes more unbalanced when we take these cost of living factors into account. Before adding them in, their take-home salaries were 40% different. After adding them in, they grew to 46% different, mostly due to increased utility costs. But on the other hand, for our families, the difference became greater in the German family's favor. Especially when you were a young family and potentially still working to support yourself, these differences in costs aren't arbitrary. All right, guys, so because last week's video was so comprehensive, and knowing myself, I was bound to make at least some mistakes. I'm not at all surprised that there was a couple. The big one, though, that I just want to at least mention in this video is that I very mistakenly said that the Solidaritätszuschlag, or the solidarity surcharge, is only paid by Western states, when in fact it's Germany-wide. It's paid by both the East and the West. Again, my sincerest apologies for that error. But I also wanted just to briefly touch on something that was extremely common in the comment section, which was to point out that there are significant differences in vacation days between Germany and the United States, and kind of having a little bit of discussion on whether or not this would actually affect things in terms of, affordability and cost of living and all of that. Now, in the US, you would likely need to work for over a decade at a company before you would even meet the federally mandated minimum amount of vacation time here in Germany. And in addition to that, there are laws in Germany stipulating how many hours an employer can legally require you to work and how much time you legally have to have off between shifts. And in short, Germany just has a lot stronger worker protection laws that basically make sure that workers aren't exploited or burned out. So whether you're looking at vacation leave, maternity, paternity leave, or sick leave, all of that plays into the decision making that anybody would have on whether to work in the United States and Germany. And maybe you could argue that by the time you factor in all of those benefits, that this does contribute somewhat to the differences in salaries between the two countries. But ultimately, though, this isn't something I can really objectively calculate for in this video. But again, if you're someone who's watching this video as a means of understanding work culture, hands down, Germany has a much better work-life balance. But you might make less money at your job. So for me, you ultimately have to ask yourself, why do you work and how do you want to spend your life? Would you like to make more money so that those 2 to 3 weeks of vacation you get each year can be spent more lavishly? Or would you like to make slightly less money but have greater time to spend with your family and friends? And I think that's a really nice food for thought to leave you with at the end of this video. But as always, guys, if you enjoyed what you saw today, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get regular updates on new videos from the Black Forest family. So with that, I'll see you next Sunday. Tschüss!